Or did
Yeah,
you?
Scott. So Fiona Hill, former senior official under George W. Bush and under Trump, recently confirmed in Foreign Affairs that U.S. officials knew that back in April there was the broad outline of an agreement between Ukraine and Russia, which is basically Russia would return to its pre-invasion position, and in exchange, Ukraine would declare neutrality and also be provided with security guarantees. And what Fiona Hill left out was what was reported in the Ukrainian media, which is that right after that agreement was reached, Boris Johnson was dispatched to go to Kiev and met with Zelensky and told him, you cannot make a deal with Putin, and if you do, we will not provide you with any security guarantees, thereby rendering any such agreement with Russia worthless. So that sabotaged diplomacy. What I'm wondering is, in your assessment, do you think such a deal, like the one that was reportedly agreed on back in April, is still possible now?
No, 100% not. There will never be a negotiation. It's not just my position. The Russians have said the same thing. The day of that kind of negotiation is long gone. Too much has transpired since then. And the other thing is Zelensky has committed to NATO. I mean, even though they're not a NATO member, Ukraine is more NATO than just about any other NATO nation. And so I don't see any backing down. Plus the anti, again, now we come into that, sort of a philosophical question about what is the Russian nation. There's just no way politically Putin could allow that kind of deal, because it would allow too many members of what he calls the Russian nation to be under the sovereignty of a government that calls them orcs, that treats them as subhumans, that has, basically dehumanized them, eliminated the culture, the history, the language. So politically, it's impossible for the Russian government to cut that kind of deal today with the Zelensky government. It might have been available to them early on. I think Fiona Hill is, frankly speaking, giving far more credence to a negotiation that had not been as settled as she claims it was. There was a lot of problems with that negotiation. But today, the Russians have, even though Putin is telling Modi and others that we are looking for a negotiated settlement, a path to negotiations, I don't see doing that, because this would be a strategic defeat for Russia at this point in time. It would be a strategic victory for Ukraine, a strategic defeat for Russia, and at a time when Putin is winning the geopolitical struggle to transition from American singularity to global multipolarity. So, and that's the big picture. So I don't see Putin undermining everything by agreeing to a negotiation that gives away too much and accepts nothing.
So quick follow-up, because we haven't addressed this yet. Does this mean we're, in your view, guaranteed to have a war dragging through winter? And is Russia, how much of Russia's strategy is relying on Europeans turning against their own governments after they suffer the impact of cutting off Russian energy and dealing with energy rationing, not having heat, not having food during the wintertime?
I think Russia's operating on two parallel campaign strategies. One is a military campaign that's totally divorced from anything else, and the other is a geopolitical campaign that relates to the economic sanctions. Just looking at how the Russians believe, I mean, I think it's widely accepted that Russia was looking for a quick victory when they first went into Ukraine. Phase one was supposed to be sort of a shock and awe thing that caused the Ukrainian government to collapse and seek negotiated settlement. That didn't work. March 25th, they transitioned to phase two. And I think phase two was seeking to create a new reality by capturing totality of the Donbass region and then rapidly turning to Ukraine and say, this is the reality. Let's have an agreement. The defense of the Donbass proved to be too tough of a nut for Russia to crack. I mean, when you have 8 years to dig in and create the most sophisticated, detailed, in-depth trench fortification system, it takes a long time. And Russia was slowly picking it apart, but it wasn't going at the pace. And now we have phase three, this new phase, even though it's not formally announced by Russia. There's a new reality called the NATO $53 billion that Russia has to deal with. So the military campaign is now facing the reality that this thing is going to go through the wintertime easily. If Russia is going to generate, another 100,000, 200,000 of volunteers. It takes 4 months to train them, minimum. And so automatically, this is going to go through the wintertime, automatically. But come spring, I think Russia is going to resume the offense, this time with sufficient forces to the task. And they're not only going to secure the Donbass, but I think you're looking at Novorossiya becoming a political reality. Odessa, Kharkov, Dnepropetrovsk, all becoming under Russian control, to the goal of which is to cause a collapse in the Ukrainian government, which facilitates demilitarization, denazification. That's the Russian plan. No plan survives initial contact with the enemy, and we have no idea how this is going to play out. That's my understanding of what the Russian military plan is. It's separate from the geopolitical plan, which has transformed into, and believe me, Russia didn't want to go down this path. Russia did not want to hurt Europe. This was never Russia's goal and objective. The freezing of Europe is solely the responsibility of the Europeans. If Russia wanted to freeze Europe, they would have shut off the gas on day one. Russia has been willing to sell energy to Europe at contract rates. It's Europe that opted out. And now because Europe opted out, Russia is now, and the Europe opting out of the Russian willingness to sell is parallel to the decision to provide $53 billion plus of aid to Ukraine. So now Russia has made that linkage and has determined that the European policies are inherently bad for Russia. Therefore, Russia is going to exploit the vulnerability that Europe created by its sanctioning Russian energy, exploit it by letting winter do its thing. And I think Russia is going to position itself to best exploit whatever outcome comes, whether governments fall, whether governments change, whether there's revolution, whatever. Russia will be there to make sure that whatever transpires in post-winter Europe can be used to Russia's advantage. And that's the diplomatic link. The fact the two are operating in parallel, and right now we seem to have coinciding timelines. But I think that's more of an accident of history as opposed to some Russian 5D chess player back in the Kremlin thinking all of this out in February.
Right. Right. Well, I have a, before my question, I just wanted to introduce a conspiracy theory, and shout out to Scott's dog. He's been a
yeah, I don't know how to shut them up.
Is that Maverick
loyal
Scott?
viewer, Grayzone viewer.
That's all three of them now. It's a concert. It's a concert.
It's the three hounds of the apocalypse. Okay, well, this is a video from 2020 of Ursula von der Leyen showing people how to wash their hands. And I think it's a conspiracy because I'm obviously being tongue in cheek, but she turns off the water while she is showing you how to wash your hands. And it's almost like she's preparing 2 years in advance for an energy crisis. This is really helpful if you're in Europe right now. Please follow these instructions because you might not have hot water this winter. Gather wood at your local tree because you might need to burn it. Because of this woman, Ursula von der Leyen, who married into the, wow, there it is. Look at that. Do you trust her? I don't know. Did anyone ever elect this bride of Frankenstein looking freak who actually married into the von der Leyen family that ran a silk factory in Germany, which was so cruel to its workers in the 1830s, I believe it was, that it was one of the first workers' strikes in Germany, and it was documented by a young man named Karl Marx. So that's who she is. Her hands are definitely clean. Anyway, enjoy winter. It's going to be, I mean, and we're starting to see a lot of protest activity in Germany now, all across Europe, and this is putting increasing pressure. The German military is preparing to deploy in October ahead of what the interior minister calls a winter of radical riots. So this is, these are boomerang sanctions. But
didn't that work out well for Tsarist Russia? I thought when those guys, what were they called, Bolsheviks, and they were demonstrating in the streets, and the Tsar sent the Russian military out to what happened? Oh yeah, they flipped, and that was the end of the Tsar. Hey, Schultz, bad idea, man. Don't send the troops against the people. Not when the people are protesting against your policies. Go ahead,
Well,
Max. I apologize.
well, they already did to some extent during COVID. I mean, the amount of military
Yeah.
on the streets, it seems like it was a preparation.